Dr. Hardman is a global thought leader in learning design, edtech, and AI. She is an affiliate scholar at University of Cambridge. She's a learning scientist and creator of DOMS, which is a groundbreaking evidence-based learning design process. She has spent 20 years researching how people learn and using it to design more effective learning experiences. She's recognized as LinkedIn Top Voice, TEDx speaker, and winner of 2024 InnoFounder Award. She's contributed greatly to bridging the gap between learning science and the practice of learning design through her work. And a part of this is also her free newsletter on evidence-based learning experiences and emerging insights on how AI is changing the field. It's subscribed by over 12,000 people, and I am one of the subscribers, and bunch of us in the community are. She's currently on a mission to help the world design smarter learning experiences with AI, and I guess her presence here is a part of this larger mission. So, Dr. Phil, we are so excited to have you here with us today. Is there anything that you'd like to share or say before we begin our conversation?
Yeah, well, just thank you for having me and for the invitation. And also, I just put it in the chat, but just to say it out loud, thank you to you for kind of convening this community. I think it's any opportunity that we have as learning designers to come together to share what we're doing, and to really help to progress our practice through sharing is, I think, a great thing. And so I really appreciate the work that you and the team at the LDC are doing to make that happen. And thank you to everybody who's here. Appreciate your time and attention and energy. I had a quick look at some of the questions that you've submitted in advance, and they look fantastic. So I am just very keen to get on, and I hope to help to maybe demystify some of this AI stuff. I guess one more thing, just to pick up on your introduction, I think my primary focus is and always has been how do we make the process of designing learning experiences more effective, with ultimately the goal of having more impact on learning outcomes. And so the lens through which I look at AI is as a potential tool to help us to achieve that goal and that, that mission that you referred to. And that therefore, I guess my approach to AI is one which is critically minded. I don't make any assumptions. I think where we are right now is at the very beginning of a journey. But I think one thing that we have seen already, and that we've learned from small experiments with AI in education over the last 40, 50 years, because that's how long it's been around, is that it can have both positive and negative impacts on, let's say, efficiency, so speed, but also effectiveness or quality of work. And so, yeah, there's no black and white answer. AI is neither good nor bad. It's complicated, but I think it's also interesting because it's complicated partly. And there's some really interesting opportunities that it offers us, which are both positive, are really positive, I think. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to explore that a little bit today. But yeah, this is all ultimately about quality and impact rather than technology, I guess, is the framing that I want to think about this today.
Thanks a bunch for that framing, Dr. Hardman. I think that's really the goal of learning, is finally, achieving the learning outcomes that we set out for. So I hope that this conversation will take us one step further in that direction. So I'll start with the big picture, right? And I can speak for many people who are joining us today and people who subscribe to newsletters and are active on LinkedIn. There's too much happening on AI and learning. It's almost impossible to follow the trends and the releases and the research, but we know that you are at the center of this work. So a bunch of our members are keen on understanding what are the top changes that AI is driving in learning and education. So what would you say are, let's say, the top 3 changes that you're noticing here? And also, if AI is changing learning, so do we need to rethink the role of memory in learning or anything of that sort? Let's start from there.
Yeah, no, it's a great question and a great start point. I agree, there's so much noise about AI. I'm very aware of that, and hopefully I can try and cut through some of that. There is a lot. But yeah, in terms of just trying to cut through that noise and get down to like the fundamentals of what's happening right now for us, what's of relevance, what's interesting, I think the first thing I would observe, and you will have almost certainly heard me say this before, is that the main changes that we're seeing in education broadly and in learning design specifically are like AI is generally impacting on efficiency first. And this is generally how innovation happens. When a new technology emerges, what we tend to do is to think about how it can solve our most immediate pain. There is a long, long history of technology adoption and innovation which backs this up. And I think we're seeing that right now. So if we take the start point as 3 years ago, which is the point at which, of course, that generative AI came out, the point at which something that was very specialized became very generalized and accessible. Since then, we've focused primarily on basically speeding up what we already do. So in oiling the machine of learning design, and what that means in practice is that one of the key things that we've seen changed is the way that we do some administrative tasks, things which are repetitive, things which are relatively functional. There's a lot of delegation of those tasks to AI, but we're also seeing the use of AI primarily for content creation. And so we've all seen, I am sure, a huge raft of technologies emerging, and they continue to emerge, which are built to make things which are expensive and slow, so primarily video creation, faster and cheaper. So there has been a lot of emphasis on increasing efficiency, less so on increasing effectiveness. So whether or not these technologies are enabling us to have more impact on quality and outcomes is a question mark. All we know right now is that they solve a hair on fire problem of speed and cost. So that's one of the changes. I think in some ways we have seen the acceleration of a problem that's been going on for many years, which is that we've become more content centric. We have focused more on content than we have on building experiences which actually drive engagement, motivation, achievement, outcomes, these kind of things. But on a more positive side, I think this is changing. I think that will continue for sure. There's money there, therefore there is stuff there. There are tools there. But what I am seeing is educators and learning designers starting to think more strategically actually about the potential of AI, not just to make us more efficient, but to make us more effective. And I think there's a couple of things here that I'm noticing. For example, on my bootcamp, when people come along, they share where they are in their AI journey. And so these are some, I think, really up-to-date insights into where AI is impacting right now, like our day-to-day practice. And one of them is more evidence-based practices. So I'm often asked, like, what's your favorite AI tool? Which one tool would you adopt if you could adopt any? The answer is research tools. So to be specific, things like Consensus, things like Storm by Stanford, potentially also Perplexity, which I know is very popular with learning designers. But what we're seeing is that because generic AI tools like ChatGPT and Claude are not great at instructional design, we are seeing a deepening of focus on what great looks like. So we go to the research tools. We, for example, research what we know about what is the optimal way to write and sequence learning objectives, for example. We're able to access that information like never before, and then we can use that to prompt AI to tell it not just what to do, but how to do it. And I think that's one of the main changes that I am seeing right now, is this shift of emphasis from making stuff faster to ensuring quality. And I think that's emerged partly from the realization that ChatGPT, Claude, the generic tools that most of us have access to, are actually not that great at instructional design. And I think in that way, AI is a really positive force, almost indirectly. Generic AI is, if we want to get value from it, it requires us to become expert. It requires us to be able to tell AI not just what we want, but how it should go about doing it. And then also we need the expertise to validate its output. So the short version of all of this is I think we are witnessing a shift in emphasis to evidence. And on just very, I know I'm talking a lot, but just on this, I know I heard a sub question which was specifically about whether the focus of education is changing. So to shift to the actual experience, are we seeing less emphasis on things like memorizing information, because AI can now help us to surface that in ways which are more reliable and faster than ever before. And I think very, very slowly, on the ground in formal education, absolutely not. But we are seeing trends elsewhere where in some very innovative universities, for example, and I would encourage you primarily to look at Arizona State University here, what we're seeing is absolutely this. So instead of education being primarily about being able to remember and show an understanding of a topic, we are seeing more and more the integration of AI to tackle what we might call higher order kind of skills and to develop those skills. So things more like analysis, evaluation, critical thinking. And of course, AI is a great tool for this because it is so flawed. So, with great issues, with hallucination, with overconfidence and a lack of competence comes a really great tool for exploring the shortcomings, I guess, of certain types of information. So I think that's on the horizon. I think we will see the emergence of learning designs, learning experiences, which are much more focused on analyzing, assessing skills rather than necessarily knowledge. But we should not exaggerate, like we're not there yet. And there's still many formal education institutions who are still trying to think of ways to protect the established system, to protect essays, to protect exams. We see them, if not investing in AI detection technologies, then bringing people back into rooms so we can watch you do stuff so that we don't have to integrate AI. But as we integrate AI more into education, which I think we will see inevitably, I think, a shift from, education as a tool for developing factual knowledge and being able to remember and regurgitate that, to to education being a process of developing high order skills, which, let's not forget, has been the purpose and in theory, the purpose and the goal of education for many years. So yes, that is a long answer, but it's all about speed and cost still, but we're seeing a new focus emerging on AI as a tool to make us better at what we do.
Thanks, Dr. Hardman. That was incredibly insightful. And yes, that's always been the goal of education, to develop those higher order skills.
Yeah,
But AI sort of made it almost necessary to focus on
exactly.
that. And we'll be talking specifically about assessments. It's a struggle that especially educators are having now, that learners have access to AI tools. But we'll get to that shortly. Let's talk about learning design more broadly. So what are some of the ways AI has been used in learning design that got you excited? And
Ah,
some include different things, right? AI-powered edtech
yeah.
tools or anything else.
Yeah, great question. I think just to build on what I was saying before, I guess there's two things here which are maybe interesting for the community, certainly were interesting and exciting for me. So the first one, which is interesting, is that most learning designers start thinking that AI is, if we think of the ADDIE process, AI is most powerful in the development bit, because suddenly things that were, again, painful, slow, expensive, and also which, took up the majority of my time, but actually I'm a designer, I'm not a builder of things. Suddenly there's a tool that can help me there. Great. And so I think lots of people got, or perhaps are still getting, excited about those tools. And I think, I do think there are value in those tools. I think used correctly, they will help to solve a wicked problem of learning design, which is having to focus too much on building stuff rather than on actually making sure that we're building the right thing in the first place. So analysis, design. So I think that's interesting. But what's exciting to me, and perhaps more interesting still, is that I think the real value of AI for us as learning designers actually sits everywhere but the development bit. So again, one thing on my on the bootcamp is we do a project across each stage of ADDIE or something similar. And actually it's development where people on the bootcamp, learning designers, find that AI is least helpful. It looks magic on the surface, but when we get into the detail, what we find is that, for example, AI images, videos are not fit for purpose. There are very few people able to produce materials which we feel are high enough quality, which are free enough from biases, which reflect, I don't know, our branding guidelines, whatever it is. They're magic in appearance because I put in some text and I got something out at the end, and they're certainly getting better. Even just over the last few months, they've got significantly better. But actually, to get a really great output in the like from a video generation or image generation tool is very difficult. What we're finding instead is that the most exciting use cases are, as I say, really everywhere else in the ADDIE process. So in particular, people get very excited, and as do I, about the potential of AI for analysis. This is an example of a stage of our process which is perhaps the most important. It's basically, if we think of ourselves as developing products, which is effectively what we do, it's the point at which we identify, well, what's the problem we're trying to solve? And what's the solution, the best solution to that problem? And yet in practice, what we find when we do interviews and surveys is that we spend maybe between 5 and 8% of our time there. We spend more time making videos than we do actually defining what this should be. And so AI offers some really interesting different use cases, and that I've been actively testing again with people on my bootcamp. And I guess just a couple of really concrete examples that seem to get others excited. So one is the use of again, these research tools that we now have access to help us to do really great needs analysis. So instead of just sending out a survey and hoping we get some information back, or instead of just running one or two interviews, we can now go deep on needs analysis research and use really optimal methodologies to make sure that we are gathering the right sorts of insights from the right sorts of sources. We can now also make much better use of the existing data. So as much as we spend a lot of time writing and executing surveys and interviews when we start our process, actually there's a lot we can do with aggregated data that we've got from LMSs, from previous surveys, maybe from things like Slack channels in the workplace, where people are talking about different problems and this kind of thing. So on the bootcamp, we do a lot of work on doing like qualitative analysis using AI, like sentiment analysis, in order to get new insights into pain. And then we use research tools to get new insights into what an optimal solution to that problem might look like pedagogically. So I think, yeah, it's examples like that. It's being able to work with AI to just do what we already do deeper and better, as well as faster, where I think it's most exciting. So my tip would be to think about what use cases look like, especially for analysis and evaluation, which I think are the two very important stages of our process where there is definitely a lack of attention. And I think the biggest benefit of the rise of AI-powered content creation is that it frees the time up to focus more there, rather than thinking, great, we can just do the same thing faster. So yeah, that's just my take, and particularly analysis. I think it enables us to do much more and to do it faster, but also deeper.
That's really insightful, Dr. Hardman. Define the problem that learning is trying to solve. First, let's use AI for that instead of just creating content faster. I think that's the message that we're. But can I just ask a follow-up question on? So
Yeah.
when you say use AI for needs assessment, better identifying the learning needs, etc. So if AI is not integrated into the AI, the learning management platform that one is using, can AI still be used for needs assessment? If yes, how would you recommend
Yes.
one goes about it?
Yeah, so I mean, I would definitely encourage everybody to kind of just brainstorm potential different sources. So the LMS is definitely a source of information. One thing the LMS is good at, and yeah, I won't go into that, but there's maybe not many things it's good at, but it is good at usually at at least some analytics. And so that data can be exported. So to get super concrete, for example, you can export data from an LMS into an Excel, the quantitative data, and then use a tool like Julius AI, for example, which is fine-tuned to be good at data analysis, but it's text input, so it's natural language. You can just basically say, oh, have a look at this Excel and give me some insights into some trends that we're seeing in, for example, I don't know, things which do and don't seem to motivate learners, for example. So yes, you can take data out of LMSs that's quantitative. You can also take out data that is qualitative. So that might be discussion forums, this kind of thing, to get a sense of like, what is the general sentiment? Are people participating? What kind of language are they using? And what insights does that give us into them as learners? What's exciting, what's relevant, etc., etc. But also an AI, because it takes away some of the load, it enables us to get more inventive. So as I say, we've also been playing around, learning designers who, for example, work in corporates, have been playing around with taking information from like Teams and Slack and using that as an insight into using that really to take a more data-informed approach to what we design in the first place. I think often that's a best guess, or it's like, oh, well, the CEO said leadership is a priority, leadership skills for everyone, so that's what we're going to design. Whereas actually by going in and looking at conversations, it might also be anonymized performance reporting, whatever it is. We can now mine information in a way that we couldn't before. All of this with caveats around like AI's bias and this kind of thing, and like the need for validation and checking, and we can talk about that. But there is value in AI for sure, AI analyses of both qualitative stuff and quantitative. And it enables us, as I say, to be able to say, well, if these are your KPIs, these should be your priorities, because this is where there is real pain, rather than just kind of plucking ideas for training out of the air, or attempting to prioritize based on, I don't know, who's most influential in a room in a single meeting. So it enables us to become more data informed, and I think that's really exciting. A couple of notes and then I'll shut up. One is generic AI tools like Claude and ChatGPT and Copilot and Gemini are not good at maths. Do not trust their maths. They're very confident on everything. Confidence in those LLMs does not reflect competence. It just reflects the fact they've been trained to be confident. So I always say, like, treat it like the loud white man in the pub who's had a pint. It's like very confident, but validate everything. But then there are other tools. So I've mentioned specifically Julius AI, which are fine-tuned to be really good at quantitative analysis. So again, comes with caveats. AI is never perfect, but seek out tools which are as close to your specific purpose and goal as possible, and you are likely to reduce the risk of hallucination, whatever, just basically being misled. Yeah.
Great. It's really nice that you've been, talking about the risks, the biases, and the pitfalls of AI throughout, as you talk about even the best uses. But if we focus specifically on that, there have been questions around just these limitations. Have you seen examples where AI in education or learning didn't work as intended? And what are the lessons we can take from those experiences?
I mean, yes, I see so many, and this is kind of what motivates me, but also kind of keeps me awake a bit at night. And it's that we trust AI too much, by which I mean if you think of the human AI relationship is a bit like having a human in the loop, is like think of the human as the bookends. So there's AI in the middle, but what it needs in order to perform well is a really good input and then somebody to validate the output. What I see far too often is educators, learning designers, just assuming that AI is as good at what they do as they are. And so one of the common errors that I see that leads to poor quality outputs, and I did some measurement on this, and it can actually reduce the quality of work compared to not working with AI, which is the last thing that we want. Over-reliance on AI, I suppose, is just asking AI to do a thing, not instructing it on how to do a thing. And if you do that, it basically just takes the mean of everything it knows from the internet and gives you back that which is most common, not that which is optimal. And so to give you one of the things that AI always throws back, and I'm sure like people will feel this pain as I do. Nobody else understands this, but I know that like we are of the same background here. But it often refers to learning styles, for example, and that's even though they are debunked, they're talked about a lot, and they've been talked about a lot on the internet over the last 20 years, and therefore they are prominent in AI's training. And so I think there are lots of examples like this where AI is used. It's almost seen as magic. So it's like, oh my God, brilliant. It used to take me 3 months to design something, and now I can just say, design me a course on XYZ, press go, or write me some objectives on XYZ, go, and there they are. But it's a little bit like I was saying earlier with the images and the videos. When you look closer, actually the quality is low. The quality is no better than an apprentice who you are just trying, like just starting to work with. And so in order to get the most from that apprentice, what you need is a very clear set of instructions, what to do, how to do it, also resources. So maybe we can talk a bit more about this later, but being a bit more constrained on where AI looks. So telling ChatGPT only use information from this PDF that I'm going to give you to, for example, design a course and validate its output. So I think that's where like this over-reliance or maybe like underestimation of your importance in this dynamic is where I've seen most errors and most risk of us working with AI.
Thanks for that word of caution, how important it is to write good prompts and how important it is to tell AI how to do what we need it to do.
Yeah, and I'm gonna trademark this maybe, but in like in the boot camp we have a saying which we like repeat all the time, which is AI needs you. Without your input, again, think of it as not a professor. Sometimes it is like hailed as this, like the discourse, the dialogue around AI is like it's godlike, it's all powerful. Either that's dystopian or utopian. The other thing is that it's sort of all-knowing. It's almost like a professor of everything, whereas actually in reality, it's a very confident but very underdeveloped apprentice. And so absolutely, don't just ask it to do a thing. You need to tell it how to do it, and you need to effectively teach it. And that's one way to think about AI. It turns us all into, it requires us all to be teachers, at least for now, because generic AI, it needs to be taught how to do something. Otherwise, it will just do that which is average by definition.
Those are really powerful words. We're gonna make LDC t-shirts also saying that. AI.
AI needs you.
Yeah, we're gonna do that
Let's
after
do
this. But my next question, Dr. Hardman, for you is this community is made of learning professionals, right? And we are all wanting to understand how should we adapt our role to meet the shifts coming with AI? And are there any frameworks or principles that you recommend on how to revisit our roles?
Yeah, I think I've certainly seen this in my day-to-day work that and I see this as a progression for us as learning designers. I do actually think that used well, AI is going to be a positive force for our professionalization. What do I mean by that? So if you imagine how how the medical world professionalized, what it requires is a lot of research and evidence-based practice, of making sure that all of the decisions that we make are based on data. And traditionally, that's been very, very hard for learning design. But I think that's starting to change. And so the way that what I would encourage people to do when it comes to AI, and let's not forget we're at the very beginning of this. So there are no hard and fast rules really for how to work with AI right now. But the most productive thing I think that we can do is to take on more of a experimental or research kind of attitude and mindset. I've been doing quite a lot of consulting recently, and we talk a lot about how L&D teams or how instructional designers and those around them need to really become R&D teams to start to research and develop like data on how the heck should we be using AI? Where does it add value and where doesn't it? How do we prioritize this? And so I have a framework. I'm very happy to share it with everybody afterwards. So like we don't have to go into too much detail, but essentially it's about, as a first step, forget the technology. It's just about thinking, what tasks do I do most often? What does my workflow look like? And what I tend to do here is to try and break it down into something like the ADDIE process and write all of the individual tasks that I do in each stage, just to kind of map out your workflow. And then from that, that's the moment at which we then need to think, well, what can AI do right now? And therefore, what hypotheses might I start to form? And we don't have answers right now. So the best thing you can do is form questions, hypotheses. So for example, I had a hypothesis that I could use AI to speed up very specific tasks within my development process. That I could, for example, start to generate videos 10 times faster, let's say, at a tenth of the cost. And then what I do is I test it. And I have a very basic Notion page that compares how long does it take me without AI and how long does it take me with. But there's two measurements that we need to make here. One is time. So does it make you quicker? And if so, how much? And what's the quality of the output? So you can imagine videos scored very high on making me much quicker at making videos, but actually very low on impact on quality. So the short version of this is we need to all start becoming researchers. And that sounds like, oh my God, that's a lot of work. It isn't necessarily. These things can be super fast. We already know what our current process looks like. We already have an idea of how long it takes. But what I would encourage you to do is try to break this down into tasks where you think AI might bring value, but to actually measure it. And I think you could be surprised at some of the results. And as I say, what I've learned so far is that most value sits in areas that perhaps are surprising. So we get the biggest return on investment in AI in the analysis and evaluation stages, far more so than in the development stages where it makes us faster, but actually in reality it doesn't, because the quality is so low that we then need to fix AI's mistake. So I think the framework, the mindset is definitely one of research and just basic testing. We don't have the answers yet. We don't know. We all need to be part of this movement to identify, to not make assumptions about the impact of AI, but to start to measure it and then to share that information in forums like these.
Thanks. That was a very insightful, Dr. Hardman. Just looking at the time, and I'm going to club two questions. It's tricky. I mean, they're different, but I hope you can answer both of them
Yeah.
simultaneously. So the one is on subject, right? There are, and the other one is on age. So there are members, I guess, especially these are teachers and learning designers who design stuff for younger audience. That they want to understand if there's a right age to introduce AI. So that's one. And the second one is about subjects. So are there specific subject that that AI could be used better for? So is AI more impactful for teaching math rather than say philosophy, history, or social science, where AI biases or its lack of demographic nuance can have an impact? And what
Yeah.
about there's also learning L&D professionals here who train people on skills like communication, leadership, etc. Is AI helpful there as well? So there's subject and age, if you could respond to both.
Interesting. Yes. Okay. So let me combine these two in my brain. So on age, interesting one. I personally, and I probably in the grand scheme of things, I'm cautious, but I don't like to proceed until I have like information that suggests I should. So when it comes to this question around age and at what age is it appropriate to introduce AI, I would say right now, we do not have enough assurances about the quality and the safety and the ethics and the bias of AI to introduce it into the classroom for kids. When I'm working with, I mean, there are exceptions. There are things which are specifically built for these age groups, but generally speaking, right now for us, I think the most value of AI sits in enabling us to design better and faster, of thinking of it as a tool for analysis, for design, for evaluation, more than implementation. I think I would be wary right now of using, for example, building a bot in a tool like OpenAI's GPT Builder or something like Poe and putting it out into the world, because this feels very dangerous. I guess there are like different ways of thinking about this though. So I mean, there are people talking about AI with young children, by which I mean like 5 and 11-year-olds, so like the primary classroom in the UK. But it's being introduced really as just a tool for personalization and differentiation. So again, it's more the tool of the teacher than it is in the hands of the pupil, and that's what we're seeing on the ground. So I think that's the situation there. I think for teenagers, so when we get into more like the GCSE and A level in UK terms, but like 12 to 17-year-olds, we start to see AI being introduced in classrooms really as a point of discussion, to introduce interesting conversations, particularly in topics like humanities. We were, to bring in the topic, the subjects, where, conversations about like the reliability of sources, of like evidence-based argumentation. So which of these sources is more reliable and why? What we're seeing is the introduction of AI into some classrooms as a way of making that conversation more interesting. So do you trust ChatGPT more than, I don't know, this photograph from the 1950s? And if so, why? Like which is more reliable, and this kind of thing. So we're seeing AI in some schools, I should say not many, these are the minority. In most schools, it's just business as usual. But where AI is introduced, it's introduced as a tool to really fuel these conversations, particularly arts and humanities, things about, related to the reliability of knowledge, of the importance of critique, of analysis, of evaluation, and these kind of skills. I think we're seeing AI used less in STEM subjects, which is interesting because I think we maybe associate AI with STEM subjects, but in those subjects, I guess AI is a less interesting teaching and learning tool in that it might hallucinate response. There are definite correct and incorrect ways of doing things, and so and as we know, AI hallucinates. It is not great at maths, and so we see it generally used less. It's less of a powerful tool in the classroom for STEM subjects right now than it is for these kind of arts and humanities type subjects. And then for adults, what I'm seeing in the workplace generally is just like it's more about what I just described. So we're at the very beginning of something. And so in the professional context, AI is being experimented with rather than used necessarily. So there's some interesting experiments going on to measure the impact that it can have on efficiency and on effectiveness. And also some interesting conversations going on around like the ethical concerns and this kind of thing. But generally, in all of these contexts, AI is being used to design and develop rather than deliver learning right now.
Okay, that really gave a broad picture of where we are headed with this and also across different sectors. I'm going to take one last question because participants, some people made the effort of posting questions in advance, and then we'll open it up for the questions that are coming up on chat. So one last question is really, and we've got a lot of members coming from low resource context in Asia and Africa. And the question really is, that the members feel that there are teams with very limited resources and they may hesitate to adopt AI as they deal with more urgent issues, and this could have an impact in the long run. So how can these teams take small but practical steps towards AI integration?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, again, let's go back to this experimental mindset. So there are free to use tools like ChatGPT and Claude, and they will enable you to very rapidly test different hypotheses, different use cases. And what that enables you to do is to identify if we have X amount of resource to dedicate to innovation, let's say, you can surface information about where that should be and why. So where will AI help you? And so I mean, I work with a lot of organizations that ask exactly this question. It's like we have 1,000,001 other things to do, particularly in K-12. It's like it's raining in. We need to buy more books. Like AI is the last thing on our list, but the thing that I always encourage is, at least if you have a small amount of resource, to dedicate it to just testing some use cases, because you might be able to bring additional value either in terms of efficiency and or effectiveness and impact by using AI. So the number one rule, I guess, for anybody, regardless of resources, don't be going out and just buying AI tools. Like, you know, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but like, I see a lot of organizations just going out and buying the tool that everyone's talking about, this kind of magpie approach, whereas actually it's just all about identifying where is the value. And I think if you have very low resource, at the very least, you hopefully you have enough resource to be able to identify if and what sort of AI use cases you should be experimenting with. But on a very practical and very immediate level, there are so many AI tools which are free, and which are slower, usually have lower capacity, but are as reliable and can be used for this testing in the same way that paid for tools can be. I always make this point on the bootcamp. I take part myself and build things. I always use free to use tools because I want to make sure that they, or at least try to assess how they compare. And I don't want it to be a requirement that people have to buy things, and they work well. And so I think in some ways this is a unusual technology in that there's a low entry point. So yeah, I think some
Great.
interesting
Thanks.
opportunities.
It's great because we are at the beginning of this movement. We have access to a lot of free tools. They may start charging a lot more later. But
Yeah, and
let's move
I'm
on
sure they
to
will.
participants' questions. Ragini, over to you for this part.
Yeah, that was super, super interesting. Personally, taking away the analysis and evaluation and how we should really be going deeper with that in our learning design work. In connection to that, Lilith asks us, what is a good tool for qualitative analysis? You mentioned Julius for quantitative analysis,
Hmm.
but what about qualitative analysis?
Yeah, great question. So I think maybe the first thing to say here is that no AI tool is perfect. So it comes with this caveat, and encourage everybody, if you can, to again take this experimental researcher type mindset and compare tools. Do exactly the same thing in two things. So primarily ChatGPT maybe and Claude, two free versions if that's what it needs to be, and compare how they perform. But those tools, and so in my experience, Claude is pretty good at qualitative analysis, sentiment analysis. Really, it's a combination of the ability both of the AI and the human. And so what I would recommend as the way of going about qualitative analysis, and maybe this is a sentiment analysis, and this is maybe a good case study that you could maybe go away and try after this session, is I would first go to Consensus or to Storm, which is a research tool by Stanford, and ask, what does the research tell us about how to run really great sentiment analysis? If you want to get even more specific, ask it, what does the research tell us about how to do really great semantic analysis on insert source type? So like, I don't know, Slack conversations. And what that will give you is the insights, the information that you need in order to be able to tell AI, so to tell ChatGPT or Claude what to do, but how to do it. So you can do a sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis is, these are the steps, go. And what you're going to end up with is far more control and oversight of like AI's thinking, although it will still be impacted by its training. You're giving it specific steps to work through. And what you can be guaranteed then out of the end is the best possible quality output, because it's the equivalent of like an expert in sentiment analysis has done this. So Claude and ChatGPT, but start, and to be honest, this is true of everything. Like my mantra is always evidence-based prompting. Go to the research tools first, and just to be clear, the difference is ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, generic AI tools like that, trained on internet. Consensus and Storm by Stanford are research tools. They're trained to look in the case of Consensus are only peer-reviewed articles. I should say not all, so there are gaps, but only. And in the case of Storm, they have been curated by a combination of AI and Stanford to be reliable sources. So that might be industry standards. It might be well-cited articles from certain journals and peer-reviewed stuff. And really what they do is they enable us to access the how, and then basically create the opportunity for us then to teach AI how to do that too. So yeah, hopefully that's helpful. Other tools, just for a little bit more context, like Julius AI, they've already been fine-tuned in the background to know how to, for example, run a qualitative analysis. So you can be a little bit more vague there. You can give it very clear instructions. You can tell it that you want, a specific ANOVA test of whatever or whatever, or you can just say, do your thing. And because it knows what its thing is, it can be kind of more heavily relied on. So it just goes back to this point around like always try to pick a tool that is designed for your specific task. And if it isn't, make sure you define not just what to do, but how to do it.
Definitely. And I think another use case that a lot of us are very passionate and excited about is reaching very heterogeneous learner groups where, it might be a multi-generational learner population. It might be different levels of, the concepts that are being taught. So for personalization, for differentiation, are there any specific AI tools that we could be tapping into?
No, nothing specialized built. However, like you are, I guess, the experts in this. And one great affordance of AI is that it does make us faster. And so what we can do is to much more rapidly create. So what I'm seeing again on the boot camps, I'm just referring to that because it's like learning designers on the ground. What they're now able to do is to do deeper needs analysis, to be able to surface not just one, but multiple personas, like you say, Regini, like different ages, different locations, they have different needs, different motivations. And so what we're able to do with fueled by this extra data and fueled by this sidekick who is able to turn that data very quickly into multiple personas, we can then write multiple versions of a single course much more effectively. So you can imagine it's where, on average, what I'm seeing is that where designers used to be able to design one thing, they can now design 4 or 5 in a tenth of the time. And so I guess I would encourage you to try to evolve out of the mindset of like one learning experience, one learner persona, to actually try to understand and really push how many personas am I representing here? And then what does the differentiated learning experience look like? In order to get there, it's still up to us to define the how. So if you just say to AI, to a generic AI tool, differentiate this for old and young, it will have a good go, but don't forget it will be the equivalent of like a junior apprentice doing that. So this is your opportunity, I guess, to use AI as a means of really honing in on what are the critical things we need to differentiate. So for example, that might be the mode of delivery, but it might also be the tone of voice, which has a huge impact on levels of engagement and motivation of different ages, different cultures, different case studies. If case studies resonate with learners, they are more likely to engage, be motivated to achieve. So again, it's about going back to the research, finding out what is like gold level differentiation, and then working with AI to apply that. And I think that's beautiful. I think that is much more beautiful a way of doing it than this kind of co-creation way is much more interesting, and I think beneficial and has more value than just having a machine that will like differentiate one thing into another thing without all of that analysis and without the insight of a human to be able to understand who these specific learners are, to go through all of these steps.
And when it comes to assessments, would you have any, but like, should we treat it the same way that we treat some of the activity design, or is there any specific one AI
Yeah,
tools, but two, also the way we think of assessments? Do we
yeah.
need to be thinking about that as well?
Yeah, so just very, very quickly, because I'm mindful of time. If anyone's got to go, I don't want to overrun. But yes, so in line with the shift that we described earlier in terms of like shifting from can you remember this thing? Can you show me you understand this thing? To actually assessing skills. What we're seeing is a shift from the assessment of knowledge, of memorization and understanding, to the assessment of skills. So I guess the things to, maybe as a start point, go and ask Consensus or Storm to tell you all about process-based assessment and project-based assessment. And the short version is that instead of just being summative, these are both formative and summative. And instead of only assessing output, so like, I don't know, domain knowledge, did you remember it right? Did you regurgitate it correctly? Did you have a critical understanding? It also assesses people on the how, on their methodologies. So if, for example, you used AI, I require all my students to use AI. How well did you? Like, how well did you, did you compare AI models? I don't know. Did you think critically about if and how this might be biased and this kind of thing? So we're seeing very, very gradually, but these early adopters, these groundbreaking universities, for example, who are moving into this post-AI world, this is the shift we're seeing. So shift from, basically knowledge transfer to, as I say, process and project-based assessment. But yeah, maybe that's a little project we can all try out, is that we go away and try Storm or Consensus and get it just to tell us what that looks like. And the other thing it can do, just very quickly, is give it your old assessment, tell it to apply those principles of process or project-based assessment, and it will rejig it. And it's quite beautiful. And it just gives you a real life insight into the before and after and where we might be going.
All right. I think we'll be mindful of time. I know that you'll have a packed day ahead of you, but thank you so much, Dr. Philippa Hardman. We've learned so much in this conversation, and the chat is buzzing as well. I'm not being able to keep up with some of the questions that are being asked here. Shraddha, would you like to say anything at this point?
Yeah, just think. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I was just going to very quick. Sorry, Shraddha. Oh my God, I can't believe it. So anyway, I was just going to say, I will use the magic of AI potentially to go through all of the questions. If you can send me the text version and I can answer them using my magic bots that I've built to think like me. So do keep the questions coming, and I'm very happy to just follow up with some responses.
Great, that's amazing. Okay, and yeah, so do I would say just as a subscriber and a follower of Dr. Hardman on LinkedIn, it's a great way to learn about what's happening in the field and get some really practical tips on how to get better at using AI for learning design. So that's just wanted to say that. But thank you so much for this conversation. I just want to close with a few announcements of our upcoming events after this. And also just want to let everyone know that in about a minute, we'll be opening up space for just this networking time. If you want to stay back and just talk to other people who are joining this webinar from different parts of the world and different sectors, stay back to connect with them. Our next event would happen next month on 6th of February. It's with Mike Taylor, who is a globally recognized learning strategist and an ATD facilitator. He's also co-author of an upcoming book titled Think Like a Marketer and Train Like an L&D Pro. And really, he'll be telling us about what we can steal from marketing to basically captivate learners, engage them, and drive impact in our learning design. Before that, I'm just reminding you also, day after tomorrow, which is on Saturday, we'll be reading Dr. Hardman's blog on state of instructional design, which is based on a global survey. So we'll be reading that together to understand how the field is changing with AI and how do we need to reimagine our role as learning designers. And we'll be discussing how we are experiencing this shift in our jobs. So do join us on Saturday, and then again next month for understanding how marketing can be used in our field. One more announcement is also of LDC blog, and our focus is on AI for learning. We're launching the Learning Designers blog. Here you can hear stories of AI integration in learning design across corporate, nonprofit, and education sectors, specifically focusing on stories from Asia and Africa. So just experiments with AI happening in Asia and Africa. You can follow us on LinkedIn to read these amazing stories. With that, I will officially close this webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much, Dr. Hardman, for sharing so many insights. I think we're going to all watch this recording it'll be available on YouTube again and again to make notes. And maybe not make notes. We'll just use our AI tools to get the best out of it. Thank you
Yes,
so much
definitely.
for that.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. And if you're interested in connecting with the other fellow designers who are joining us, do stay back. We'll start the networking session in just about a minute. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us today.